So if you count the number of stem cells in people with heart disease, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, hypertension, all these people will have on average 50% or less than the number of stem cells that you find in a healthy person of the same age. Once we really understand what stem cells are, what the repair system is in the body, and how we can tap into this repair system, I think it changes our understanding of health, wellness, and even the way to practice medicine. So we have identified a glycoprotein, which is a blocker of L-selectin, and within about an hour after consuming an extract of blue-green algae of AFA, then we can quantify a significant increase in the number of stem cells in circulation.
What's the mechanism that these specific nutrients do cause the body to produce its own stem cells on a larger volume?
Before I get into this, it's important to just understand, I'll try to make it really as simple as possible. So
I am here today with a very interesting gentleman, Christian Drapeau, who has spent many years developing very high-level wellness products, but looking at it from a very different angle. And he's going to give a download of all the most important things involving stimulation of stem cells. And Christian, if you could give us a quick snapshot of where you are like right now, what you're doing now, your levels that you're at currently, and then take us back to how you got into this, what inspired this whole thing, and where you see the future after that going from here into the future.
So right now, most of my involvement is to basically show what the concept that I have developed, which is endogenous stem cell mobilization, which means tapping into stem cells by releasing our own, the impact that this can have in, let's say, heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, lung disease, not to claim that we can have an effect on these diseases, but just to show the extent of the ability of our own stem cells to repair. So I'm involved into a lot of those clinical trials right now and really trying to push this information, what we're going to talk about today, to bring this really to the main general population, because once we really understand what stem cells are, what the repair system is in the body, and how we can tap into this repair system, I think it changes our understanding of health, wellness, and even the way to practice medicine, longevity. It has huge implications. So my main focus right now is to kind of spread that information and do more of the clinical trials. And it all started when I was hired in 1995. My background is brain research, and I was hired to study a plant you may have heard about, Klamath Lake blue-green algae, and to study its mechanisms of action, how it was working in the body, the bioactive compounds, and to explain how it was working. And as I'm doing that study, one thing leading to another, I discovered that its main mechanism of action was actually to trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. Once we made that observation or that discovery, then everything in my life kind of shifted into the whole field of stem cell research. And I've been doing this since then.
Wow. So, yeah, very interesting. I ran into the Klamath Lake, some folks from there way back, like right at the beginning in 2006, 2007, when I first started my journey. And it's basically this cyanobacteria or a blue-green algae, and it's got all these different medicinal compounds. But what's the number one biggest component of Klamath Lake algae that you've discovered that has the action?
I mean, there are three main benefits that have been reported and that has been the reason why blue-green algae from Klamath Lake, AFA, which is its abbreviation, has been used. And inflammation, immune boosting, and an increase in a sense of mental clarity, mental energy, mood elevation. And the compounds are very simple. Phycocyanin, the blue pigment, and actually all blue-green algae, including spirulina, is a COX-2 inhibitor, which means a potent anti-inflammatory compound. There's a polysaccharide in AFA that stimulates various aspects of the immune system. The main ones are the activation and migration of NK cell. So it explains all the benefits that people have reported over the years with viral infections. And phenylethylamine is the component for the the brain. So phenylethylamine is known in chemistry as the molecule of love or the molecule of joy. Whenever you're content, like you're doing something like, I don't know, you do sculpture and you're fully absorbed into what you're doing. You're not hungry. The noise is not, flow state. The noise is not bothering you. Your financial problems, you don't have to worry. They'll be back tomorrow. But right now, they're not bothering you. Your brain is making PEA, and it boosts norepinephrine and dopamine in the brain. So it is a natural compound in AFA at a concentration that has been shown to be actually to the point of being antidepressant. So these are the main bioactive, but the effect that to me is really the most powerful is its effect on stem cells. So we have identified a glycoprotein, which is a blocker of L-selectin, and within about an hour after consuming an extract of blue-green algae of AFA, then we can quantify a significant increase in the number of stem cells in circulation.
Yeah, so it's a very potent and it's a totally natural product. When was it first discovered that it was going to be good for human consumption?
I mean, it really started, if I make the brief history, it was Daryl Coleman. He was a teacher in, I believe it was in New Mexico. And he was in San Diego. And he was in a place where it was really students that were not having good grades, a problem area. And he thought nutrition was the main problem for these kids. So he started to get involved with spirulina. Then it started to grow spirulina. And then at some point, somebody who heard about what he was doing with spirulina kind of told him, if you're interested in blue-green algae, there's a lake in my backyard, there's full of it. And he said, send me some samples. And this fellow filled 2 big barrels, like 45-gallon barrels of blue-green algae, shipped that to him on a reefer truck. And when Daryl Coleman received it, this was like 2 months harvest for him in his ponds. So he thought it was amazing. So he drove up to Klamath Lake in Oregon. And when he saw this lake, I mean, it's 25 miles of a natural lake. And the estimation at any one point during the harvest season, which is like June to November, there's about an estimated 14 tons of blue-green algae floating in that lake that is just there to be collected. It's not that easy to collect it, just to make that clear. But nevertheless, it's a biomass that is available. So he moved from he was in New Mexico at that time, moved there, relocated in Klamath Falls, and started to market this product in 1982. But it became big in the mid-1990s.
Right. Now, as far as the processing of it to stabilize it, is it traditionally turned into a powder through like a lyophilization or refractive window, or what's the best way that they've made it so it doesn't damage it in the process to get it ready shelf stable?
Well, the freeze drying is what has been used like traditionally over the years. When I left, the company was called Celtec at the time. When I left Celtec and joined Desert Lake Technologies, which is where we developed all the data on stem cells and other applications, we started to use the refractance window. It was already known, but not really utilized that much. It's a beautiful technology. It, to an extent, will protect fine compounds like volatiles, like flavor oils, and those kinds of things, even to a greater extent than freeze drying. So then we started to develop refractance window, which is one of the main drying method right now used in Klamath Falls, with the companies providing this product.
Yeah, very good. Now, are there different extracts that you can get out of this Klamath Lake algae that are like more concentrated for things that people could take a larger amount of in the ratio?
Yeah, there are. I mean, it has not been, well, let's go back to what I was talking about before. So we have phenylethylamine, we have a polysaccharide, we have the blue pigments. So there's a point where I started to separate this blue-green algae in all these different products for different application. So the idea when I started to work on this in the early 2000s is that the market was moving away from blue-green algae being something like Earth's first food, something that is like a wild crafted food, which are interesting concept, but post-Deshay, we were really entering into mechanisms of action, more like biotech type products. So my vision here was to fractionate this product into the polysaccharide for the immune system, the phenylethylamine for mental clarity, the phycocyanin for inflammation. Phycocyanin is also present in spirulina. So it is a product that is available, but it's much, much cheaper to do it from spirulina, which is what a lot of the companies now in Klamath Falls have done. They have a phycocyanin product, but it's from spirulina. The polysaccharide has never been developed so far. I'm including it in some products. I'm starting to develop it. But what really happened were like in early 2002, I would say, we have developed the data on stem cells. I'm looking at what stem cells can really be on the marketplace. I mean, it can literally change the face of the earth in terms of wellness. So I saw this limited biomass and I thought, let's stop developing these other products, because when stem cell is really, when the concept of stem cells really start to be accepted on the marketplace, the lake is not even big enough to provide enough product for a stem cell application. So we started to go in that direction, but we have sort of kind of stop developing other product other than the extract that has an effect on stem cells, which is really sort of the biggest use right now, aside from just whole AFA for all of its benefits.
Right. When you leave it in its original state and you refractance window it and you don't take out the ratios, that heirloom original strain has all the stuff for so many things.
Correct.
You don't really need to separate it, right?
We separate it just because there's two reasons. Number one, if I make a product like STEMREGEN that is much more complex, we have seen that you need 1 gram of the extract to have an effect. So if you also need a certain amount of sea buckthorn berry, a certain amount of Nonoto ginseng, there's a point where you cannot package all of that into one capsule. So 5 gram of AFA to be able to get the effect that we have documented. So we need to derive an extract to be able to put all of this formulation into 2 capsules. So that is one of the aim, to do the extraction and to do a concentration. But yeah, if you take enough product, you would assume that you would get the same effect. The other benefits, which really gets to what I just talked about before, is that we get a better effect with 1 gram of the extract than with 5 grams of the original product. And my suspicion here is simply that as you fractionate the whole AFA and you create these extract, you extract them also of the overall matrix in which they are in blue green algae, and I think we get a greater bioavailability. It's the only explanation I have why we see a stronger effect from the extract compared to the whole plant.
And then the person's not having to take so much product or so many pills. Correct. Or whatever it ends up being. So the research you've done is really defining the most concentrated stuff for the benefit, to focus on the stem cell stimulation, right, to get your body to produce more. And now the other question is, because it's an open lake, what's the purification process, or how do you certify the purity of the product on each batch?
I mean, it's tested for everything in terms of, heavy metals, contaminants, bacteria, various toxins. I mean, it's pesticides. Pesticides have never been seen in the lake. We need to understand that when, I think it's around the 1980s, pesticides were kind of banned in the area because there were 2 endangered species that had been identified in the lake, and also bald eagle. Klamath Lake was the greatest density of nesting bald eagle in continental USA. So because of the bald eagle being an endangered species, there was a ban of all use of pesticides in the area. So by the time that harvest really started, when I joined in 1995, we have never seen pesticides, in the lake. So the lake by itself is a very pure lake. The water of the lake, like the irrigation of the lake, is a complicated story. Let me put it this way. And when I say complicated, is that there's no real understanding to this day of what is the real water budget of the lake. What I mean by this is that there are a number of small rivers, 2 main rivers that are coming to the north of the lake. These rivers, you can actually walk to the head of the river, and you get to an area where you have, I don't know, like an acre or 2, and it's watering, the water is bubbling from the ground, and then it forms this little lagoon, and that's where that river is starting. So 90% of the water budget is snow melts, and the rest is coming from these rivers. It's coming from water coming from the ground. It's coming from a volcanic area. But when you take water from the ground, like if you extend your arm in one of these holes and you take a water sample, it's about 4 degrees Celsius. This is about like 38, 37, 38 degrees in a volcanic area. As the water is taken from the ground, it is pH 8, but it contains virtually no minerals, no calcium. So it actually behaves like fully structured water. So it's a very, very unique water. The water at 4 degrees, if you were to drink it, you actually don't even feel it hitting your stomach. So you absorbed it like very rapidly. It's an amazing water source. That's what flows mostly into Klamath Lake. And interestingly, it's very difficult to grow AFA in the lab, but if you use the water from the lake to grow it, it will grow. So there's something very unique for that water that has so far not really been identified. There is an area of about 30 feet diameter, 30 to 60 feet diameter in the middle of the lake that in the winter does not freeze. It's a hot vent of water that is coming there. That also has not been identified. Like, what is the ultimate source of the water coming into that lake? So that's the water that we have in Klamath Lake. Now, there was some grazing around the lake. It's been fairly removed now since probably, I think, like the late 1990s, with a huge collaboration with farmers, Pacific Corp, wildlife services. So there's much, much less of these nitrates coming from cow manure, but it's pollution from a drinking water standpoint. You call it organic fertilizers, you put it on your carrot. So we harvest blue-green algae from the water. So by itself, it's not really contaminant from the purpose of consumption of the algae. So it's also a fairly pure area for the algae itself. So the algae is collected, rinsed, and then basically just dried.
Yeah, beautiful. So it's what's the elevation above sea level?
If I remember well, it's about 4,200 feet.
4,200 feet. Okay.
Yep.
And what is so there's no industry around there.
There's no industry around the lake. No, it's Wainema National Forest to the east, Cascade National Forest or National Forest to the west. To the northern end, it's Crater Lake National Park, and to the southern part, then is the city of Klamath Falls. So essentially, there's no pollution, no industrial activity anywhere around the lake, except at the very southern tip of the lake, which is, there's no activity, but it's the town. So anything is, if there's anything, is just like carried south through Klamath River. So the lake itself is untouched.
Right. So the area itself has been more or less declared a heritage gem in the United States, right? They've woke up and they realized, hey, we better be careful with this place and make sure we don't have anything that we could damage the biosphere and make sure that it keeps producing.
It's a beautiful area. And even from a ecology standpoint, the best explanation of the situation is that, so because there was Upper Klamath Lake and Lower Klamath Lake long time ago, like 1 million or 2 million years ago. Lower Klamath Lake now is gone. It's just like you can see it's a huge plain. You can tell it was a lake, but there's no water. So it's all farmland today. And so Upper Klamath Lake has been there for a long time. And it's believed to be sitting on, well, not believed, it is sitting on 3 tectonic plates, but it's believed to be the reason why in the last ice ages, the lake actually did not freeze. So the lake has been accumulating wildlife and basically biodegradable matter from wildlife for a long time. So the lake is 25 miles long, about 8 miles diameter. It has a median depth of 5 feet. There are areas so there's a glacier that passed. So there is an area in the lake that is about 60 feet deep. But if you have a medium depth of 5 feet, that gives you a good idea that many areas in the lake are not very deep. So the word out there is that if you go on your boat for recreational activity, well, number one, you'll get out of the lake completely green. But if your boat tip, just stand up, you'll be fine. You'll be able to stand up in the lake. Don't move, because if you start moving, you will sink into about 30 feet of sediments. And those sediments, it was estimated that 1 inch of sediments could provide the nutrient for 60 years of bloom of this blue-green algae in the lake. So it has a biology that is hyper-eutrophic like there's so much nutrient in the lake coming from all this deposit that it should be a dead lake. but it's actually a river. There's about 5,400 acre feet of water coming in and out of the lake every day. So it's a very, very unique ecosystem. It should be a marsh, like a dead lake, but because of the amount of water coming into it, it is more like a river, a flowing river, but its ecology, its bottom is the bottom of a hyper-eutrophic lake. It's a fascinating ecosystem.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a very specific kind of an energy, just like what Victor Schauberger found back in his work as a forester. Do you remember Victor Schauberger?
I don't.
So Victor Schauberger I think he passed in 1958. But what he did, this 4 degrees, is it 4 degrees centigrade or 4 degrees Fahrenheit?
Centigrade.
Centigrade. So what he found, there was a 4 degrees centigrade temperature from the water that goes to the top of a mountain. He was wondering how it gets there. Why would it come to the top of these big mountains in Europe? And as the water goes down the river or down the mountain, it doesn't go straight down. It goes winding back and forth the entire time. So he did a test. Everywhere on that river, all the way from the very top to the very bottom, was 4 degrees centigrade. And he said that doesn't even make sense because you have atmospheric changes all the way down. And then he discovered that it has something to do with the vortex of the water as it goes around every corner. It twists and it spins the water. And he noticed that fish were swimming up the river and they would have a rest in a pond part where the river has a little larger area. And he saw that they were not moving any fins or wiggling at all, and they weren't being pushed down in a fairly strong current. And that puzzled him. He was like, what's that? And then fish could go up falls, like spin, like jump, and go up these falls to the next level on the mountain. And again, that doesn't make sense because they're going against water coming down very quickly and able to get up there. So he did a test where he got his workers and they put a huge cauldron on fire they boiled massive amounts of water, as much as they could get, on the thinnest part of the water, where then they would go to a pool where a fish was at. And there's a book written on this. And they were managed to get the water to 5 degrees as the warmest they could get it to, trying to pour the hot water in. And he noticed that when it went to 4.1 degrees, the fish had to start moving a little bit. And every 0.1 degrees, all the way up to 5, when it got to 5, it just shot the fish down the river and it couldn't keep up as hard as it could swim. And it went back to the normal 4 degrees centigrade. So there's something about that temperature that tells you there's something extremely unique happening in that lake. Now, is that temperature pretty consistent throughout all the seasons?
The lake is not 4 degrees. The water coming out from the water sources, water springs, is 4 degrees. Klamath Lake has a huge, huge sun exposure. So when the summer comes over, like when you reach like end of July, August, the water is actually fairly warm. But you go back in the water sources and the water is all year round 4 degrees Celsius. The best understanding right now is that you've got Crater Lake to the north. It's probably what I would say maybe like 20 some miles from the head of those rivers. There's a 2,000 column of water in Crater Lake, which is absolute pristine blue water. And what is believed is that the weight of that column is pushing the water underground, and the water is pressurized. And it is through this pressure, just like the water coming from glacier, the Hunza that are drinking this amazing water, like naturally restructured water. It's believed that it's the same pressure that restructures that water, which gives it the super high pH, very, very low surface tension, and being 4 degrees Celsius when it comes out of the ground. So that's the understanding right now of where this water is coming from.
Right. So that makes sense. The feed source is that super water that's making that lake, no matter what temperature the lake is, it's going to have that super, whatever that is, whether it's minerals or energy from whatever, from the earth. And then the sun is giving all of the photosynthesis for the bloom to happen. And you said there was just the right amount of everything. So this is a total phenomena. Are there any other lakes in the world that have ever been discovered anything like this?
There is, like, the species itself has been seen in many, many places. But I remember once walking around with somebody who was working for the forest services there, and was showing me, like, here, you see this lake has AFA. You see the filament right there. And, you could see the filament, but what you're talking on Klamath Lake is like a mat of algae that is a few inches accumulating at the surface. I don't believe the rumor, but there was a rumor where at times, when the bloom was really thick, you could see like foxes crossing the lake, going to one of the island, running on the water. I don't think so, but you would believe that it could. Like when you go with a motor on that lake with algae, you look back, it looks like you're boating on pea soup. I mean, it's totally green. So that density is rare. What is unique at Klamath Lake is that density is with essentially a monoculture, meaning 99.9% of the algae that you have in Klamath Lake is that one species. There are other lakes like Clear Lake, for example, in California, where you can have fairly significant density of water, but you have AFA blended with microcystin, blended, what is the name of this other algae? But they're not edible, and you cannot really separate them very easily. So that is the reason why nowhere else in the world harvesting of AFA is doable. It grows, for example, in Lake Winnipeg. You can see AFA in Lake Winnipeg with a significant density. The problem is that the lake is 70 miles long. It is, I think, 25 miles wide. So on a calm day, you get like 4-foot waves on that lake. You cannot have an accumulation of that algae at the surface. Therefore, you cannot collect it. You need this accumulation to be able to collect it.
Right. So the boating allowed on Klamath is non-motorized?
It is motorized.
Oh, they do have motorized boats.
They do have motorized. I mean, they don't have a lot. There's a lot of sailboats, but no, they do have some motor. I mean, there's not a lot of activity on the lake for the main reason that if you do water ski, if you swim, whatever you do, you come out of there like completely green. Your boat, your engine, and if it dries that way, your engine is stuck with like green stuff dried into your blades and everywhere. So the city would love for this to be a big recreational lake, but it's not because of the inconvenience of being green.
Yeah, so the lake knows how to take care of itself. Maybe itself and repel people. That's really good.
There you go.
I've traveled all over and I see people who have products all the time. And everyone always tries to find a reason why they should be selling their product versus someone else's. And I think there's a lot of misinformation. I mean, not a ton, because I've only heard this a few times. But people will always say, oh, well, you don't ever want to have anything from Klamath Lake. And so I'll say, well, why? Oh, well,
misconception.
No. Oh, it is, totally. I know. But the misinformation, have you run into that kind of misinformation?
Oh my goodness, all my life. I mean, I'm no longer like working there in Klamath Falls because now I'm doing other things. This was just the first ingredient that we documented as having an effect on stem cells. But until that point, for a good 10 years of my life, I mean, I was there in Klamath Falls working on the lake. Of course, I've heard all these stories. Even today, like recently, there was a YouTube lecture, whatever, by someone talking about the toxicity of this blue-green algae. It is absolutely untrue. But it still resurfaces once in a while, people gathering old information that has been completely disproven, but it's still out there. I mean, I regularly have to answer to it. It is a pristine environment. It is an amazing product. It is pure because of all this misinformation that industry has had to test their product for so many contaminants. I don't think when you take blue-green algae from Klamath Lake, I don't think you can consume a whole lot of other products that have been tested for safety more than that product.
Right, exactly. And it's a matter of just bringing the facts and not going on somebody who just wants to differentiate themselves to get a name or get some views or do some clickbait and something goes viral. Is very interesting. Yeah. So
I mean, a lot of this came at some point. I cannot just put all the blame there, but a lot of it came, at least when I was there in the 1990s, from the spearlaying industry. They thought that by promoting all this information, it would get rid of this annoyance industry, that was kind of for them competition. So a lot of it came from there, and then it was taken and repeated by a lot of other people in Germany at some point. we faced a lot of resistance because there was a whole market that developed for ADD. Kids with ADD taking this blue green algae were doing like fabulously. And I am convinced it was never a real competitor for Ritalin. But the company Novartis that was marketing Ritalin in Europe didn't like it. And at some point they came out and they just really trashed the product for its supposed toxicity. Things like this. We've been facing this for a long time.
Yeah, so that's good. And we have to just simply dispel these myths and realize, hey, you know, the person listening to this podcast right now or watching the video, you know, you have to discern for yourself based upon actual data. And when you look at the physical results that you're testing and you've seen, you've been on the ground on this longer than anyone else I've ever met. And you've seen the physical results, the energetic, the brain power, the stem cell stimulation. Can we get into why, like what's the mechanism that these specific nutrients do cause the body to produce its own stem cells on a larger volume, and how that works with people as they're older, even with the good bone marrow they have that is not turned into a yellow bone marrow, and they still get a major benefit?
So the way, before I get into this, it's important to just understand, I'll try to make it really as simple as possible. What is the mechanism for releasing stem cells? Because we release stem cells every day. A stem cell, once it's released, will be in your bloodstream anywhere between 6 minutes to 6 hours with an average of roughly 1 hour. So if I take a blood sample and at any time of the day, I can quantify a certain level of stem cells in your bloodstream, that means you're constantly releasing stem cells. So it's a natural process. We're just boosting that system by interfering with the mechanism of adhesion of stem cells to the bone marrow. And that is referred in science as the SDF1 CXCR4 axis. CXCR4 is a receptor at the surface of stem cells, and SDF1, stromal-derived factor 1, is the agonist, the molecule that will connect with that receptor. This is an exclusive relationship. That's the only molecule that will connect to that receptor. When they connect, it will make the stem cell express adhesion molecule, which will make the stem cell cling to the environment where it is. In the blood circulation, it's your capillary. In the bone marrow, it's the bone marrow matrix. So anything that you do to interfere with this connection, it will then reduce the stem cell's ability to have these adhesion molecule and to connect and grip into the bone marrow environment, and it detaches and it goes into the blood circulation. Your natural response when you have an injury, it will trigger the release of a compound called GCSF, granulocyte colony stimulating factor. That compound will do many things, but one of the things is that in the bone marrow, it will trigger the secretion of an enzyme that will digest SDF1. So if you digest SDF1, you no longer have the connection. Without the connection, you no longer have the adhesion molecule, and then your body will release a massive number of stem cells that will then be called to repair your body. So that is one way to affect stem cell release. There is a molecule called L-selectin. When it is activated, it triggers the release of the receptor. So if you downregulate L-selectin and you inhibit L-selectin, downregulate those receptors, SDF1 is there, but you no longer have the receptor for it. So you're going to trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So these are like the main mechanism. There's a drug out there called AMD 3100. It's a blocker of the receptor. So if you block the receptor, SDF1 is there, but it can't connect with the receptor, you get release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So with that in mind, what we have shown is that blue-green algae contains a blocker of L-selectin. So by blocking the L-selectin, you downregulate the receptor, so you trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. The sea buckthorn berry seems to work. Notogensin does the same thing. They work by triggering the release in your bloodstream of molecules like stem cell factor, for example, which will work like GCSF, which will trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So just like you have fasting mimicking compounds, we can qualify these compounds as injury mimicking compounds. They make your body react temporarily as if you had an injury. So that will then trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So these are the different ways with which these plant extract work by triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow.
Okay, so I have another question. When your body is congested with stuck stem cells that are not releasing, and then they go to be released, does the body trigger then to produce its own more stem cells on a larger basis because now it realizes, hey, I don't have those stem cells there, they're floating. Does the body then produce more as a result of this release?
Correct. I don't know if, at least from a scientific standpoint, the idea that it's congested and they're stuck in the bone marrow, I'm not sure if it's a correct way of describing them. We do have good mobilizers, we do have poor mobilizers, and they translate in the world as the people who repair fast when they have an injury and people who don't repair fast as an injury. So it's a real thing in health, being able to release stem cells. But do we release them because they're stuck, or just because our ability to release them? People have fast digestion, people have slow digestion, people have fast metabolism, people have slow metabolism, people are good releaser and poor releasers of stem cells. So we do have people that don't release stem cells very well. So for anybody, if we do trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow by interfering with this SDF1 CXCR4 axis, it will incidentally have a feedback loop, if you want, on the bone marrow, and the bone marrow will produce more, because your bone marrow functions pretty much like a well. You have 10 feet of water in your well. Take a bucket, come back 10 minutes later, you still have 10 feet of water in your well. Take 100 buckets of water, give it 45 minutes, and you're probably back at where you were, when you're well. Your bone marrow is like that. When you release stem cells, you don't necessarily affect the level of stem cells in your bone marrow. That's why stem cells are basically described as being, they self-replicate, and then they are immortal, so they will multiply endlessly.
Got it. So it's like going to your bank and having $1 million in your account. You take 100,000 out, and a week later you go back and you got $1 million again, right?
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, that's really cool. So let's get into the actual ingredients that are in stem cells, in the STEMREGEN particular. I didn't mean stem cells. In the STEMREGEN product, you mentioned sea buckthorn, for example.
Mm-hmm. So when we did all the work on AFA, we documented the mechanism of action, the active compound. We did the proof of concept in a muscle injury, in a mouse model of muscle injury, where we could show that the muscle repair much faster when we give them this extract of blue-green algae. And by tagging those stem cells, we can show that whatever repair that took place in the heart was actually it's stem cells that migrated in the heart and transformed into muscle cells. When we were able to do this proof of concept, safety studies and everything, so we're probably around like 2007. And then my mind is going into something that I've been chewing on now for a number of years, which is we evolved in symbiosis with the environment. It cannot be that there's only one plant that is having an effect on stem cells. So just like you have many plants having an effect on the immune system, there has to be many plants having an effect on the repair system. So how do we find them? So we basically asked the same question that we had with AFA. With AFA, the question was, if this plant is bring a broad variety of health benefits, what is the mechanism of action? We discovered it was stem cell release. So now I do the reverse question: what other plants have been associated historically with a broad variety of health benefits? So immediately what will come to mind is things like goji berry, medicinal mushroom, seaweeds, adaptogens. And we found that they pretty much all have an effect on stem cells. Many of them, their effect is that they trigger the migration of stem cells out of the blood into tissues, which is also very relevant. So that's why, as I started to discover these, I started to blend the releasers with the migrators, because that's what we want. We want to drive stem cells in the tissue. So we put more in circulation and then we drive them into tissues. But for the mobilizers, so the compound that actually trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, I discovered the main ones when I had a chance to go to China. And at some point I asked 3 biochemists that had worked for many years with plants of the Chinese pharmacopoeia. And I asked them, you're lost on an island, you can only bring one plant of the entire Chinese pharmacopoeia, what would it be? I was expecting something exotic, maybe astragalus or something else. So all 3 told me I would bring sea buckthorn berry. I was very surprised. I didn't know a whole lot about sea buckthorn berry, so I dove into the science. And then in traditional Chinese medicine, Mongolian medicine, medicine, Tibetan medicine. It's been used for thousands of years for disease of the lung, of the heart, cardiovascular system, diabetes, and to help repair from bone fracture, burn to the skin. So you look at the whole spread, and that's telling me probably we have an effect on stem cells. So I went on the Tibetan plateau because it grows into high altitude, or at least the native sea buckthorn berry grows in high altitude. So I connected with a farm on the Tibetan plateau. We derived an extract, and when we tested it, we saw a 40% increase in the number of circulating stem cells. So that's the story of the sea buckthorn berry.
Yeah, very good. I have a very good friend who I met in 2019, and she has a sea buckthorn farm that is naturally occurring. It's about 500 to 600 years old, they estimate, with the bushes, 23,000 acres at 15,000 feet in elevation. And they have a 300,000 square foot facility up there where they do all these different extracts and preparation and microencapsulation into powder with these different elements that come from the sea buckthorn, including the leaves, making tea. Yep. And they are getting absolutely phenomenal results. So that's, yeah, super cool. So you've been to Tibet up in these areas?
Yes. I mean, it's the old Tibet. It's China today, but it's the Tibetan plateau. It's what Tibet was, long time ago.
Right. Yeah. They had to purchase the farm, her and her dad, from the Chinese government.
Correct.
They actually own it now. And it's so massive. They don't allow any equipment on the property. They got 2,000 employees who go in and hand harvest everything into their little pouches. And it's very pristine. So that's exciting. So what's the ratio of the STEMREGEN from the AFA extract to these other medicinals?
Oh, gee, I don't have on top of my mind the ratio, but what we're really trying to do is to put every single ingredient at the dose that we have documented as an effect on stem cells. So we have published here. So typically what we do is that somebody comes in the morning at 8, they rest for 1 hour. Then we take a blood sample. Then we give them the plant extract that we want to test or a placebo. Then we take another blood sample an hour, 2 hours, and 3 hours later. And then using flow cytometry, we count the number of stem cells in circulation. They come back a week later, exact same condition, same time, everything. We do the exact same thing with whatever the plant or the placebo, whatever they did not take the week before. So it's blinded. And then when we analyze the data, we take the placebo response as their normal circadian cycle, and then we see what the plant did on top and above what is their normal circadian cycle. That's how we can document how many more stem cells have been in the blood circulation because of the consumption of that plant extract. So as we do this test, it turned out that 500 milligram of the sea buckthorn berry extract gives us the 50% increase. 100 milligram of the allomacroclada extract almost like doubles the number of stem cells in circulation. So all these ingredients, we've used the concentration that we have established as an effect on stem cells. The blue-green algae is the only one that is not in the full amount because it takes a gram of that extract to have the effect that we have documented, and that effect is actually the weakest of all of these ingredients. So I'm still including them because I'm attached to that ingredient. It's where I made all the original discoveries. To me, it's like a miraculous ingredient, but it's the only one that is not in its full concentration. All the other ones are in the concentration where we have documented the benefits.
Right. So if a person purchases a bottle of the STEMREGEN, how many pills a day would they take for the dosage that was based upon your research?
2 capsules. 2 capsules will give about something like a 10, 12 million additional stem cells in circulation. So it's a wave of stem cells that will be there for like 46 hours, and then they migrate in different areas wherever the body needs them for repair. And so that was a wave of stem cells on that day.
That's a very small amount. How many, is there 60 pills in a bottle?
Correct. So it's a month's supply. You're taking 2 capsules a day. Now you can take more than that, like in all the clinical trials that we're doing right now. So we have about 4 or 5 additional clinical trials in preparation. We have 2 that are ongoing, and we're just picking up conditions for which we have seen good benefits in the past. So one of them is on congestive heart failure, chronic stable congestive heart failure. The other one is on Parkinson. The one on the heart, we have a short communication that was submitted about 2 weeks ago. And so far, It's an ongoing study, but on 10 patients, 10 out of 10 have normal heart function after 6 months. And the protocol, and we have similar results on the Parkinson study, but the protocol is 2 capsules 3 times a day. So 3 times a day, people send these wave of stem cells, and they do this for 6 months. So this is literally about 1 billion of their own stem cells every month. So they have released 6 billion of their own stem cells over 6 months. So it's a cumulative daily repair that leads to very significant results.
So it's really empowering the body to heal itself or get itself back to its original blueprint. That it's a phenomenon when you get, what they call autoimmune. I don't really like titles like that, but for Parkinson's, where it's dumping massive amounts of NAD out of the system, where people are super deficient in NAD, that's one of the big factors. Does the STEMREGEN, have you done any studies that indicate that the body is able to produce more NAD as well?
I am not aware of any studies that have looked at that aspect of the mechanism of action of stem cells with Parkinson. We have cases where all we can document in humans is just the benefit, the behavioral benefits, reduction in tremor, reduction in depression, improvement quality of life, all balance, all these aspects. In animal studies, they've actually documented the rebuilding of the brain or the substantia nigra, but I'm not aware that they have looked at NAD.
Right. That would be very interesting to do that. I think I would be very surprised if there was not a definite tie-in, because our bodies produce a lot of NAD until we're about 21. And then it produces less and less as we get older, just like the stem cells. We've got large volumes of stem cells in our 20s, lower in 30s, and by the time you're 60, it's quite low. So the Parkinson thing, have you done any other autoimmune like ALS or MS or lupus or
MS, we've had a lot of cases in the past. Lupus, we've got a lot of cases in the past. ALS, we've had cases, but it's hard for me to say that it was successful. It was successful for the patient. What I mean by this is that I remember one day meeting a husband, and he was with his wife. She was in a wheelchair, and he was very, very happy of the results. And I'm looking at his wife, and I'm not saying anything, but I'm just thinking, well, she's still in a wheelchair, so I don't see here the benefits. And then he's describing to me how now she can swallow. And it took me a while to understand, after talking to experts in that area. I'm not a clinician, so I know nothing of clinical application, treatments, and dealing with patients. I'm a researcher. So, but they were describing to me that they choke on their saliva if they cannot swallow. So it becomes it's become like terrible to live with that issue. So they need to go and use straws and go and pump the saliva out, that kind of stuff. So for her to be able now to swallow and even have some sort of use of her vocal cord to be able to vocalize things was just huge in her life. So we have seen those kinds of results. Diabetes, we have seen good results. So it was, we have seen results in various types of so-called autoimmune disease.
Right. Yeah, ALS is like the most extreme of the extremes as well. And to see any improvement there at all is a big indication. Anything around rheumatoid arthritis at all that you've seen?
Yes. We have cases. We have a case that we have published. And again, I want to be clear here. When I say we have cases, sometimes I've heard the stories. I don't know anything but the story face to face, like one person telling me their story. Some of the times we're able to dig deeper, get their medical records. And it's very rare that doctors maintain medical record to meet peer-reviewed publication. So I've seen a lot of these medical records, and oftentimes I'm looking at it, you see the benefits, it's not really publishable. Like if you have not documented the benefit by the same doctor using the same methodology, then you cannot really have a reliable before and after, those kinds of things. Of those that we were able to publish, one of them was rheumatoid arthritis. So this was a lady, she was 18 years of evolution. By that time, she was unable to dress herself, bathe herself, walk, so she was wheelchair bound. And it was a very, very slow progression. 12 months later, she went through walking with a walker, then crutches, then a cane. And a year later, she was walking normally and living unassisted. So with deformation that had basically just not completely gone, but improved quite significantly. It's one case. So it's a study of N equal 1. I have no data as to how effective it could be in a general population with this kind of condition. So I cannot tell. All I can say is that we have cases. So yeah, people could see benefits.
Right. And I think this would apply to everyone in every walk of life, in every geographical area, and every age. You're simply giving them something that's going to stimulate healing response within the body, that the body has to heal itself anyway. I mean, you can't make a medical claim and say the STEMREGEN healed anything, but you don't have to. You don't have to, because it's the people who experience it themselves. And in the physical world, which is a measurable thing, you can see the improvement going from being debilitated all the way down to immobility to within a year, that person is back up and running. So it would take an extensive amount of energy and finances to be able to do, significant trials where you could actually make a claim on something that was, okay, yeah, this actually did it for everyone. But, our audience is primarily healthy people looking to get extremely healthy, and they're looking for the health in every category of their existence. And so this is a very broad spectrum nutrient, from what I'm hearing, that is going to really help everyone, regardless of what their level of health is. There's going to be a benefit. What's the affordability factor of this? When people, always people think, how expensive is it? Well, I don't like that word to start with. I don't consider, STEMREGEN purchasing an expense at all. I look at it as an investment. You're literally investing in yourself. So what's the minimum investment for that one bottle of 60 capsules per month?
Okay. I don't want to make a comparison in terms of result from like a therapeutic standpoint, but just to put things in perspective, you can go and get an injection of, let's say, 100 million stem cells for $10,000.
Right.
STEMREGEN, 2 capsules, you release about 10 million stem cells. You do this every day for a month, you will have released 300 million of your own stem cells for $189. So that's really what we're talking about here in terms of cost. The thing to keep in mind, which I don't think we've talked about, is that while stem cells are documented for repair, so they repair things that are broken, something that has been discovered during all these studies, which to me is really the deepest of those discoveries about stem cells, the most relevant for humankind. It's the fact that while stem cells will acutely, predominantly go to a place where you have an injury, in the background, they go everywhere in the body. And this observation has led to the understanding, which is not new. You've heard these phrases, you get a new body every year, 7 years, 12 years. In reality, stem cell research have shown that it's organs and tissues that will have a turnover rate specific to that tissue. You get a new skin every month, a new liver every 2-3 years, a new pancreas 4 to 6 years, a new heart. So the heart was believed traditionally to be a post-mitotic organ, meaning past age, let's say 8, 10, whatever you have in your heart, that's what you will live with. If you lose cells, too bad for you. Well, stem cell research has shown that it is not true. During your entire life, your heart constantly continues to renew itself. There's a turnover rate. So if we keep that in mind, that everything is going to a turnover rate, meaning you're losing cells every day, to stay healthy, you need to have enough stem cells to offset that cellular loss. As long as you have enough stem cells, you're perfect. You maintain your health and you maintain your body. The problem is that you were born with red marrow that converts to fatty marrow that does not make stem cells. In your 30s, there's a point you will cross that line where you will have lost about 90% of your red marrow, which corresponds to a 90% decline in the number of circulating stem cells. There's a point in your 30s you don't have enough stem cells to offset cellular loss. And from that point on, you start to accumulate microscopic deficits in various tissues. But it's this accumulation of these deficits that will end up like, let's say you build a significant deficit in your pancreas. That's diabetes. Significant deficit in substantia nigra. That's Parkinson. And you can think of any kind of age-related problems. It's always the loss of a type of cells. So I wrote this understanding of disease formation, which is the decline in the number of stem cells, about 10 years ago. And in that paper, I was saying there's a way to test for this. Let's go and count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people who have developed various kinds of age-related disease. And they should have fewer stem cells than people of the same age that are healthy. And now there's about 50 of those studies that have been done. So if you count the number of stem cells in people with heart disease, disease, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, hypertension, erectile dysfunction, liver failure, kidney failure, emphysema, lupus, Parkinson, Alzheimer's, arthritis. All these people will have, on average, 50% or less than the number of stem cells that you find in a healthy person of the same age. So for people who are into longevity medicine, just making sure, not necessarily you extend your lifespan, but you live your entire lifespan with health span. So you maintain your health. That means you boost the number of stem cells so that you can compensate for cellular loss, so that the health that you have today, you keep it for decades to come. To me, that is by far the biggest application of all this new science about stem cells. Understanding that the decline is the fundamental cause of aging and disease formation. And if you simply have more stem cells in circulation every day, then you can keep the health that you have today for decades to come. That can change the whole world of health and wellness.
All right. So your mission is to really reverse the deficit. Anything that's depleted, you're repleting as much as you can. That's what the research is really showing.
Correct.
And people want to have a high quality of life. They're not, the term longevity doesn't mean a lot because, I watched my grandmother live till 103 and my mom, her daughter lived till her 100th year. But the last 10 years, they were slowing down a lot. They were still really good, still had all their brain function. Both of them died within one day from being up and around to dying. My grandmother died because they gave her morphine because she bruised her hip and she was gone in like 36 hours. She'd never had morphine in her life. She never had any drugs. She didn't know. She was an interesting one. And my mom got a blood clot in her lower left leg and it filled her brain up. And 14 hours later, she was gone and died with no pain. It was an amazing experience for her in her life to see that. But nonetheless, at that age, they are suffering. They've got knee issues. They've got all this stuff that you can deal with. There's many ways of dealing with it. But I think really the focus today is, where are you at today? And are you getting a little bit healthier in every category tomorrow than you were today? Because when tomorrow comes, it's the day anyway. So not thinking about how long we're going to live, but the quality of life. And if your body is always getting healthier, your body just keeps staying alive. And this deterioration factor is real. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere around us constantly. We'll see it in the athletic world. In their 20s, they repair much quicker than in their 30s and their 40s, they're retired. And it's like, okay.
It's all a matter of stem cells.
Right. If a person went in, say they're 21 years old right now, and they hear about this, and they start putting a daily regimen of STEMREGEN into their system, are they able to retain a better flow of stem cells and better quality bone marrow? Have you done any studies around that, where their bone marrow does not convert so quickly to the fatty bone marrow?
This is the next area of research that I would really like to get involved with. So I'm starting to have discussion here with scientists in that field. It is very poorly studied. But the question is, can we do something to slow down the conversion of the bone marrow, or to even reconvert some fatty marrow into red marrow? It's an open question right now. Nobody has worked in that area. So it would be fascinating to do something like this. So you start in your 20s, and then if you slow down that conversion, it's probably going to be the absolute most fantastic development into what we talked about, longevity medicine, or just making sure, not that you necessarily live longer, but you have a much better quality of life, in your lifespan. So that's an area of research. But for a 21-year-old, like an athlete specifically, I think we need to look at it from the angle of recovery. So you go and you train. If you really take like a serious athlete, let's say they train from 15 years old to 35 years old. There's not a day in those 20 years where they don't have a little something somewhere. Right. There's always a small injury that will not prevent them from doing what they want to do. But you talk to any pro athletes, and they all have a little something. So the thing here is that if you don't fully repair overnight or quickly from micro lesions, micro tears, tendon, muscles, things like this, when you go back to the gym or to a workout session, you're working out on the previous micro lesions. And you do this every day without one day of rest during all that period. What impact would this have in your life if you can overnight repair because you've put more stem cells in circulation. That, so that every time you go to work out or you go to train, then you train on a fresh body or a much better, much more recovered body. And then on the long term, anytime you get an injury, it is always, virtually always, on one of these older micro lesions that have not fully repaired. So if you get rid of them, then you mitigate injuries to a large extent. To me, that is really the application. So we are starting to work with various professional athletes, teams, football, for example, basketball, and because they're starting to really see the benefit in their recovery and the reduction of injuries. That is really the application for a younger athlete.
Right. And then as they injure themselves in these micro lesions, it builds up scar tissue that accumulates over a period of time.
Absolutely.
And you can't afford to have really any scar tissue. It would be a phenomenal research to find out if you could repair them, like you said, that quickly, and the scar tissue won't accumulate. They would continue to become, stay professional athletes. I found out about a certain way that comes from not traditional Chinese medicine, but from classical, where you can use a stimulation tool and you can call action to that part of your body that you've done a 5-minute treatment on, and it will be called action to the brain to say, hey, I need a concentration of stem cells to this exact area. You release all the scar tissue, you release all the nano razor blades, because we're all breathing particulate matter from tire dust and brake dust and whatever pollutants are in the air. And you can actually release the stuff out of your system. And if you don't, they build up. I want to do a test on a pro ball pitcher, for example, where they wear their shoulders out in about 8 or 9 years from pitching at 100 miles an hour. And when they do these treatments, the shoulder never wears out. You do the treatment plus the STEMREGEN. Now you're releasing all those stem cells that didn't properly release because of all these receptor site problems and these inhibitions. I think you're tapped into something that would complement, these could complement each other, but that's for another discussion. And I'll share some things with you offline about this, and I think you'll be quite surprised. But that's one of the reasons I was so excited to speak with you, because anything that's going to be able to stimulate more of what you need more of, and you can get that area of the body to get rid of all the stuff that the stem cells literally can't get to because they're blocked. In the classical Chinese medicine, they don't call it disease, they call it blockage. And getting the organs to release. The same stimulation tool releases all the organs. You can visibly see the stuff leave. There is no question, like it's all visible. And you feel it. I had my left knee was injured when I was 21 years old because I worked in the oil field on the rigs in the field for 17 years. When I was 21, I had my leg crushed from a firewall that fell on top of me. And it was so damaged that I couldn't even twist my knee at all for 39 years. If I did, as I was a snow skier and a water skier, there was none of that for 39 years. Because even twisting my knee on a set of staircases, if I didn't go down properly, it would blow up like a basketball for a week. And the pain was continually accumulating over that 39 years, until if I was sitting in an auditorium and I couldn't put my leg straight with a seat in front of me with someone in it, I had to leave in 20 minutes. The pain was so severe. And doing 8 5-minute treatments on my knee, on all the areas of my knee, front to back and all around the top and bottom. Within 1 week, my knee was completely healed. It's perfect. I have exactly like a youthful knee again. So I ended up doing my whole body. But that's a highly unusual thing. It's not well known at all. But I would love to collaborate with you on these things that we can see rapid improvement, where the body repairs even faster based upon having these stimulators in the system to release all these stem cells. And I'm fascinated on this work you're doing with getting the conversion slowed down, and even possibly reversing the conversion from the fatty bone marrow back to the red. And you also touched on Alzheimer's. I suppose that would be also considering dementia. What have you seen with people who have gone into that phase, and were you able to slow it down or actually even have them come out of it?
I have seen cases where people have seen benefits. It's a little bit like ALS. In the case that I have seen, it's a little bit like ALS. Like it did not reverse the condition, but it improved it enough so people now can oftentimes be returned home, be living not alone, but at least not being into a, like an institution, or I don't know how you call these areas, like rehab center, whatever, like assisted living area, so they could be returned home. I remember one case that we had in France. It was a woman, and she was coming oftentimes to the lecture that I was giving there with her husband, and at some point she had to leave because he could not stand still. He could not sit still, and he would start to like create problems. And at some point it changed. He started to be much calmer. And at some point she stood up and she gave a testimonial for her husband, is that probably like within a year on the product, at some point, or there were like these moments where her husband would suddenly like come back and look at her in the eyes. And she said, at some point he looked at her and he says, "Thank you. I love you." And for her, like, so we have not changed the life of that man, but we brought releasing stem cells brought something in their life that really was for them life changing. In mouse studies, Alzheimer's has been shown to be reversed by triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So the question here is, what else do we need to do in the body to really boost the effect of stem cells, in a case like Alzheimer's? There's something else that apparently we need to do to really get better results. So something that needs to be researched.
Right. Now, you mentioned bones as well. Now, so if a person has a fracture, have you done any studies around the speed of the healing versus not having this?
Yeah. I mean, we have not done studies on it, because when I say study, that means like a full-blown clinical trials. Mm-hmm. But in the literature, it is clear that if you release stem cells from the bone marrow, you accelerate bone healing. We have worked with a number of orthopedic surgeons. Right now, we're starting a study with an orthopedic surgeon to document the reduction for the time of recovery, the much faster recovery from surgery, the moment that people start to release their own stem cells. So that's one that we have seen many, many, many times. But I don't have a study here to quote how much faster percentage shortening of time and a faster recovery. I don't have numbers, but we have seen that a lot.
Yeah, beautiful. So now we're pretty much wrapped up. What resource do you have where people can find you somewhere, maybe online, or obviously you have a website where they can find out more information about the product and actually acquire the product itself? Where should people look?
STEMREGEN.co, so STEMREGEN.co. This is our website, so they can read on a lot of the information, get the product. And I post regularly as Stem Cell Christian on both Instagram and TikTok. So I have tons of videos talking about different aspects of stem cells, products, and all of that.
Very good. And what is the retail price of one bottle of 60 capsules?
$189. I think 189. And if you can take advantage of, we don't do this a lot, but like Black Friday, I think it's probably too late for Black Friday, but we have like really significant discount. Come to the bioactive conference. We also have like really significant promotions, but otherwise 189.
Right. And if they buy more than one bottle, they can get a discount?
I am sure that there is that. I have passed on the management of the business to an outside team so I can go back to the science, but I'm sure there is.
Yeah, very good. Well, that's wonderful, Christian. This has been absolutely fascinating. You've really educated me on this today. There were so many things I didn't know about, and now I'm like a lifer. So
very cool.
Yeah, and I purchased some from you about a year ago and used it throughout the year, and but I ran out. So I was just, when Amelia arranged to have you interviewed, it's like, cool, let's find out, let's get deeper in this, because once you know why, then you take an action. I obviously did not know why at the deeper level, or I would have never allowed myself to run out of that stock, because I always see so many products, but there are very, very few in the natural health market that stand out of the crowd, what I call at the very top of the pyramid, right in that concentrated tip, where you spend the least amount of time, least amount of money, least amount of effort, least amount of energy to get the maximum return. And we're all investing in ourselves all the time. And I really am thankful you've invested your life and your resources back in all the time, and you're super focused. What year were you born?
65.
Oh, you're a youngin'. Okay, good.
I'll turn 60 in just a few months.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you're just getting going. So
there you go.
I just turned 66 in June, and I feel like a 23-year-old. And I kind of act like it too.
It's one thing that I have seen like consistently over the years. If I go give a lecture and I ask, so how many people here have been taking the product, for, let's say, at least 3 to 6 months? And if I ask, of all of you, how many can say today that you feel healthier than, let's say, 5 years ago? Almost everybody will raise their hand. We're just giving back to the body the ability to repair that it had, let's say, 10, 20 years ago. That's it. We're not doing anything more than that. But the impact of that, it can be really significant.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And nothing feels as good as feeling good. And it sounds like a super feel good thing, especially even the mood enhancement, just making you're more resilient when the chips are flying around you and there's challenges, you're able to meet those challenges with a sense of joy. And that's really important, because there are things that people go through that's pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it. So, Christian, thank you so much. We'll definitely have you on again. I'm going to give you my own personal testimony after having been on it for quite a while. And I'm also going to amp it up. I'm not just going to take 1 bottle a month. I want to get into the 3, 4, or whatever. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your effort, your investment, and for sharing this with so many people who are going to love this.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.